Welcome to Return to Heart. In this episode, Phil Herndon and Todd Wormers discuss the wound of abandonment, how it shapes our lives, and how God meets us with hope and healing. Let's get started.
Todd, here we are again. Episode 3. Yeah, that's right. So we started with 10 Man, recovery of heart. Last time we were talking about, literally the core of identity, right? The Imago Dei. And so, like any other good movie or story, there's got to be adversity, right? So, the good news is, man, we got the image of God in us, and that's where change begins. And God has made us as fearfully and wonderfully made, and we're His masterpiece. That's all great news and all true. And we live in a fallen world. Genesis 1 and 2 is God's creative genius, and the crown of His creation is humans and the Imago Dei we talked about last time. Then we get to chapter 3, and we have a thing called the fall, right? And so we're not going to talk a lot about Genesis 3 today per se, but we are going to talk about one of the outcomes of that event, that fall. So,
one of the things I loved when I learned it from you, I'm sure you learned it from someone else, but you always say, the first 2 pages of the Bible are beautiful, the last 2 pages of the Bible are beautiful, but the middle section is all about a fallen, broken world, all about abandonment. So I love when you say that, but sorry to interrupt. But.
No, man, that's okay, because I was born in Mississippi, and in Mississippi we say that, then it was a mess. It's just horrible.
It was.
And part of that is what our topic is today, that kind of that next level out from the transformational process, and it's called abandonment. And so abandonment, even the words, it just conjures up images of oh, no, I'm by myself, and the people that were with me aren't with me anymore, and what's going on. And so you and I have talked a lot about, how the brain works, and when we are abandoned, or actually when we're threatened with abandonment.
Well, before you get there, Phil, the best definition on abandonment I ever heard, and it's the simplest, is I needed you and you weren't there for me.
Oh, yeah.
That's the simplest definition. It's and I think of my own life, how that is true for me, but then the panic comes when I've kind of done to my own kids. So I just want to throw that in there before you get to the hurt piece around the abandonment.
Yeah, well, and that happens to be true, and so let's park there just for a second. That's actually a great point. We're not going to escape being abandoned, and we're not going to escape abandoning others, because how the brain operates, the brain relies on these people that said they were going to be there for me to actually be there for me, and that is literally impossible. I've told a lot of people, as have you. Parenting, parents get tired, parents have to go on business trips, parents need naps, parents are distracted, parents have bad days, low blood sugar. So there are all kinds of things that children experience abandonment. And this is a composite story I'm about to tell. So abandonment can even be for, quote, all the right reasons, but the brain still registers it as trauma. It's very common that a child can have some kind of something that happens to them that causes injury, like bodily injury. Someone I know, and again, this is a composite person, got afflicted with a disease that really crippled them, and then they were given great care. This person's parents took great care of them to get the help they needed, and in the midst of that treatment, another family member got cancer. And then a lot of attention went over to this other family member. And so the brain registered that as being abandoned, though he really wasn't abandoned. And so that's how the brain operates, is all it knows, that limbic system we talked about last time, all it knows is what happened and the emotional impact. And so that's a very important key for people to remember. Abandonment is not necessarily a badness, it's humanness, because we're going to abandon each other.
That's right.
And we have all been abandoned. And sometimes it's really traumatic and really sin and all kinds of things, and sometimes it's somewhat accidental. So, but either way that goes, we experience all kinds of feelings about abandonment. One of the main ones is hurt. Like, you said you were going to be there for me, and you're not, and you weren't. And I feel hurt about that because it's injury. And the brain is fascinating in that way. We talked about this a lot. The brain only knows that hurt is hurt. So I won't go into the details of the research that was done, but real live research, like real live people going to a real live lab and doing research on physical hurt and emotional hurt. And turns out the brain registers hurt in the same place, whether it's physical or emotional. It's like, think about the euphemisms we use in our language. If we're hurt relationally, we go, he's stabbed in the back, it's a slap in the face, a punch in the gut, broke my heart. Those kinds of things would be really painful physically. Well, back to Psalm 139. We're fearfully, wonderfully made. Our language has been telling us for years that we're experiencing emotional hurt, but we're using physical analogies to describe it. Well, it turns out the limbic system doesn't know the difference between the two. And so, slight little rant here, if we want to address the opioid epidemic, start dealing with trauma.
That's right.
Right? So opioids deal with broken ankles and broken hearts because the limbic system, that part of the brain, doesn't distinguish between the two. And so if my friend Joe is attacking me verbally, my brain doesn't know the difference between Joe attacking me verbally or attacking me physically. And so when abandonment occurs, and I want you to kind of take off on this, when abandonment occurs, what happens in the brain is I am being hurt and wounded and traumatized and cut and sliced and stabbed and those other kinds of things. So it kind of introduces the beauty of the Imago Dei and us being created and beloved. And then inhumanness, coming from Genesis 3, that third page, if you will, of Scripture, we experience this thing called abandonment, and we're just not really ever able to escape it happening.
Well, the research is amazing. So we do have time. Please tell the research, because the way you tell the story, the research around where they, again, I'm not the research guy. You're the research guy, but they take the patches of the heat patches. Tell that, please tell that, because that is so true when it comes to her and experiencing her, and even this place of abandonment.
Yeah,
that we the old adage is, sticks and stones may break my bones, and words will never hurt us. And that's so when we think about abandonment, it's not just true physical abandonment.
Yeah,
like we can have that definition. I needed you there, and you were not there for me.
Yeah.
Like I think a lot of times people hear the word abandonment and they think the person was not literally there. Yeah. But you can have people that are in the room, but they're not present in the room.
That's right.
And so that's one thing I would qualify when we talk about abandonment. It's not just, my story, being left at an airport. That's true abandonment. But then with the story you said, with the composite story, there were parents in the house, and there was 2 children in the home. But the parents were tending to the other child and left the other child abandoned. But though the parents were physically present in the room.
Yes.
And so I want our listeners to know when we're talking about abandonment, we're not just talking about the physical piece of it. We're talking really the stool would be three pages: emotional, spiritual, and physical.
Yes.
All 3 of those are the place of abandonment. But before we go in deeper to that, I do want you to tell the story of that. The research is, because it does give validity to that place of abandonment and hurt and pain. So
it does, and it's really fascinating and kind of quirky. They had the experiment started, or the research started with 40 participants. It's since been repeated with, I think the number's 2,000 people. And what they did was they asked these people to bring in a photograph of someone, here's the wording, with whom they had participated in an unwanted breakup. We call that being dumped. Like these people,
abandoned.
Or abandoned. These people have been dumped. And so they brought the photograph. They asked them to also bring a photograph of someone with whom they had a very warm relationship, a great relationship, and bring both of those. So they put them in a functional MRI machine, which basically records the brain in real time, what's happening in real time. And so they had them they put them in the functional MRI machine, had them stare at the photograph of the person that had dumped them. and just have memories about that relationship. And they recorded what happened in the brain. They pulled them out of the functional MRI. Then they gave them the other photograph and said, I want you to stare at the photograph of the person that you're really close to and they really have a great relationship with. They recorded that. They then pulled them out. They applied burn patches, very painful burn patches, obviously non-lethal, but very painful burn patches to their arms and legs, put them into the MRI machine, recorded it, pulled them out, I'm sure let them rest, took those off, put on very pleasant feeling warm patches on their bodies, put them back in. The phenomenal findings were the brain registered trauma, we'll call it trauma, registered trauma, hurt, in the looking at the painful photograph and having the painful heat applied in the same exact place, as did the other two experiences. The warm patches and the warm relationship activated the brain the same place, the same way. So, like, wow, look at that. Our language had been telling us that the whole time. Like, the limbic system, what they were measuring, it doesn't know and it doesn't care if the pain is physical or emotional, and it translates so beautifully to what you were talking about. Like, people can be physically present, but if they are not there emotionally, like we talked about it last episode about the Imago Dei and being beloved or not. If that's not present, it's really traumatic and really wounding, and we really feel hurt.
So true. So when you think of abandonment, with all the people we worked with, like, where's the place that you would say people can get lost where they haven't, like we have a lot of people, I don't want to experience trauma. I got no trauma in my life.
Yeah.
Like, we hear that a lot here at Tin Man when they're thinking about their stories. Where would you tell the listener, like, then maybe pay attention to this piece of your story as you look at, because for us, the transformational process is for every human being. It's not just for the people that come to Tin Man. It really is universal. It's a universal way of looking at humans because of the fall. And now, again, as we move progressively through that, as you called it last time, the bullseye, the outer rings, those may change. But where would you say for a listener today, like, pay attention maybe to this part of your story when it comes to that place of abandonment or fallen, broken world?
Yeah, as you said, that's a common statement. And I would think that your two children and my son would say, like, my parents, like, my dad preached on Sunday, and that's the way he lived Monday through Saturday, and that kind of thing. So I praise the Lord for that. And I will tell people often, like, man, I'm not looking for all the bad stuff in your story. So sometimes when we're talking about really powerful words like abandonment, there's something in us that says, wait a minute, I didn't have that happen to me like so-and-so did or whatever. So to me, one of the best things we can do is to just accept the fact that flawed humans raise flawed humans. And we are all, because we don't have 100% of capacity all the time, are going to have experienced that. So rather than poking around and looking for what my parents did wrong or how bad they were, and you've done it, I've done it, like, our work here is not to find out what anyone did wrong. Our job here is to look at the story as it happened. And as many people have said, lots of podcasters say, there's a distinction between naming and blaming. And so often it gets in the way, excuse me, because I don't want to blame my parents. And I've told people, I don't want my son to blame me either. However, I want him to have the freedom to name what happened in the story. So sometimes it's like, if just tell the story of what happened, and when you have something significant that came up in your life, then pay attention to that. One other kind of shortcut that I've told people about will sometimes center on what happened in the four walls of my home. Well, there are other stories that get lodged in our brains where we've experienced with other people, coaches, teachers, band directors, whoever it may be. And so to me, one of the great shortcuts, so to speak, is like, what is the story? Let me just name the story. And who are some of the people that let me down or left me really, really afraid? And just name how afraid I was without worrying about whose fault it was.
That's right. Yeah, as you say that, a couple things that ask you some questions around it. But the first thing is, I was thinking about as children, and especially more probably now than even when I was growing up, and for sure when you were growing up. But how transient the world has become, and I think I look back and I think of all the pain and feeling my friends abandoned me when their parents moved. Yeah, and that's a place for me when you're talking. I'm like, man, I don't, now sitting as a grown man, but I can remember the trauma of my friends moving or me having to move or switching schools and all that. And I think of I've got 2 little ones, and my oldest is going into high school, but she went from a public elementary school to a private school and I can remember that morning when we went from 5th grade to 6th grade and driving her, like her panic of feeling like, man, I don't know anyone and no one's going to be there for me. And what am I going to do? And so I think those are some places too. Like I wouldn't want to ever discount that. I love what Dan Allender says in his book, Redeeming Heartache. He says, every child's going to go through traumatic events, but they don't have to become trauma events as long as we're talking about what happened to us. And it's what you said. It's that naming what happened to us rather than blaming. It's like, it's my parents' fault they sent me to school. Like, no, Tennyson needs to name what happened to her of changing schools. The other thing I love when you talk about this place of abandonment and when it comes to our parents and looking back into our story of the abandonment places are, we can tend to do 2 things with our parents and miss really the core of it. We can make our parents the devil, or we can make our parents angels. So I'd love, that's not how you say it way more eloquent than that. So I'd love for you to share with the listeners that concept of naming what our parents did without blaming them either way, but that piece of demons or angels. Again, that's not how you say it, but...
Well, that's such an important concept, and actually people that were helping me, I've told people, man, I've swiped some cards for therapy in my day. And one of the first things I ran into was the permission to just tell the story. Just tell the story. And because of mentors in my life, I didn't know a whole lot about parenting when we have one son, as you know, and I didn't know a lot about parenting when he came along. But one thing that I was given through lots of help was hopefully in age-appropriate ways throughout his lifetime. He's almost 30 now. Throughout his lifetime is to say, you have freedom, and I actually want you to tell your story to safe people. And what I don't want you to have to do is be shackled to having to shine my image back to the imago. And what I was saying to him is again, hopefully age appropriately, was I don't want you to demonize me, and I don't want you to deify me. Let me be a human.
See, I told you said you're way more elegant than I do.
Close. But like I wanted him to know that I'm a human, and I'm really invested in you. I'm with you, and it's going to be imperfect, and some days terrible. So tell all of that, and let me and Mom, let us stay in between those 2 things, which is called being human. And I'm really taken by how close to the heart abandonment is, and how I so deeply want to explain it. And deification and demonization is a great way to explain the abandonment. Well, their abandoning of me is my fault because they're God, or everything that's ever happened to me is their fault because they're demons.
That's right.
And so that helps us just tell the story, just name the story, let these humans be humans. And it's such a huge part of us coming from that core Imago Dei. I think back to mainly John 14 through 16, when Jesus is telling these guys, hey, guys, let me tell you what's next. So I'm going to the cross, and after that is accomplished, tetelestai, after it is literally finished, everything I've ever need to be done, after that, I'm going to the Father. Clearly, these guys had a reaction of some kind, because for 3 chapters, Jesus says, hey guys, it's okay. It's actually better that I do this. And listen to the language Jesus uses. I'm not going to leave you as orphans. The Holy Spirit, who comes, who's already present, who's going to infill you, who's going to fill you. He's going to guide you. He's going to convict you of wrongdoing. He's going to help you have wisdom and discernment. He's going to follow you. He's actually going to advocate for you. He's going to speak for you. When you don't know what to say, he's going to say it for you. Well, that's what great parents do. And so Jesus, a look on their face, obviously Jesus knowing what was going on in them, but he delivers this message to them, and he immediately begins to comfort them, because what did they think? Oh no, you're abandoning us.
That's right.
And so we infer from that pericope, that John 14 through 16, we imply from that, when Jesus told them that he knew, either knowing their thoughts or the looks on their face, that's called limbic regulation, by the way, regulating off that face, something happened, because Jesus launches into what we call a 3-chapter talk to them about it's okay. He even uses the word a boiling pot, says they were troubled. There's like a boiling pot, like they were in chaos at the thought of Jesus leaving. And what is that called? Abandonment.
That's right.
Was it truly abandonment? Of course not. God would never do that and doesn't do that. But immediately when this idea of Jesus leaving their physical presence, they immediately began to be really afraid. Oh no, he's abandoning us. And Jesus, for 3 chapters, says, let me tell you what's happening here. I think that's extremely informative of how strong abandonment is.
So true. I mean, even, the last words he spoke to him, like, I'll never leave you.
Yes.
Like, again, you've really helped me put faces to the apostles, the disciples that, historically when I read the Bible, they're faceless people, but even that moment at the very end, and I just wonder where they're, this is the image I get. They're looking up at him as he's leaving. He's looking down at them. And it's like, just remember, I'm not. Remember what I told you a few chapters ago? I will never leave you or forsake you. Like, I'm not going to leave you as orphans. I think that's so. Again, I think it's intuitive in all of us. We don't want to be alone.
Yes.
We do not want to be abandoned. We do not want to sit there. You are the guru when it comes to research. So all my research comes from you. I love the research that I think it was done, and you can fill in where I butcher it, because I will definitely butcher it, Phil. But the research that was done again in England around people were put in a room and they said, hey, do you want to be left alone? Do you want to be abandoned? You can have 2 things. You can sit here and be abandoned just all by yourself, or if you want out, basically, shock therapy is basically what happens.
That's crazy.
And the number of people that chose shock over sitting alone in a room, it's just astonishing. And I think it's because it goes back to the self. It goes back to God created us and ourself to be in relationship with him, ourselves, and other people. And that moment where there's fractured relationship, either with ourselves or perceived with God or perceived with other people, it's like we really do go into a straight up panic.
No doubt.
And we will do anything to get out of that pain of abandonment. Again, I remember for me when I was in the airport, 15 years old, I don't remember like I'm not sure if I said it out loud, but my memory says I said it out loud to my older brother sitting in bulkhead on the right hand side of the plane when that happened. And what I said is, I will never feel this way again. What I was saying is, I will never feel this pain of abandonment ever again.
Yes.
Ever again. And that really did held true from 15 to 30 until you and other trusted people helped me get back to like, this is abandonment was not meant to be. This is not how God ever created to be. And we see that in the garden. The moment they sin, there's fractured relationship. And I'm not saying God abandoned them, but there was a fractured moment for Adam and Eve, and they did go into. They panicked. In my words, they panicked. They made more of a mess of things than they needed to out of a straight up panic. And so I don't know if you'd add anything to that.
So much there. You've alluded to it a couple of times, and I have heard maybe millions of stories in 34 years, going on 35 years of practice and pastoring. There aren't many, if there are any, stories more powerfully illustrative of abandonment than yours. I'd love for you to tell that, and I'm going to set it up in this way. Going back to the garden, is it not amazing and almost like head turning, like a dog hearing a sound, like, what now? Wait, huh? Immediately upon that breach, though we are made for deep connection, the Imago Dei, for deep connection, is it not amazing that the first words out of Adam's mouth when God's questioning him is distancing from Eve? And this human proclivity, this human tendency toward, well, if it's all up to me, it's all up to me. He immediately distanced himself from Eve, potentially putting himself all by himself, the very thing that is counterintuitive to humanity, connection. He's like, I'll just handle this on my own. It's all her fault. Again. It's crazy, isn't it? So that reminded me when you said that story. So you got to tell it. Like that story, like when I think of, I'm not kidding you, when I think of the word abandonment, one of the first things I think of is this story. And I'm not inflating it. Like I really do since the moment I heard it. By the way, before you tell it, the first time you told that story as if you told me about going into the store about a pack of gum. You remember that?
I do. It's just so much of it's just so much a part of my story. It didn't make it. I understood it was off, but it didn't make sense how off it was.
You were telling that story. I remember saying to you, words the effect of, wait a minute, do you understand the story you just told me? This kid in an airport, and so is it not amazing? Does not speak to. It looks like you had emotional resilience. And later on we're going to do a series on this idea around resilience. It looked like resilience. It wasn't resilience. It was toughness, self-will. I will not feel this. It was toughness. It allowed you to tell that story. And like I said, by that time I'd heard my share of stories. I remember sitting in that chair across from you being horrified. I looked over at you and you were like, yeah, and then I went and ate a hot dog.
It is what it is.
The anthem of apathy. So would you tell that? Like, keep in mind, if you're listening to this story, even if you've heard it before, if you know Todd, if you've heard this story before, I want you to listen to this story in the context. And Todd, this is the way you tell it intuitively. The context of this boy in this story was an image bearer of God. And intuitively counting on things being the way they ought to be. I'm going to go on this trip and I'm going to come home and I'm just going to kind of pick back up being a kid. So because you're an image bearer. And then the story occurred. So you take it from there. Yeah,
I guess, again, this is not to shame my parents at all, any of them or all of them. Which is sad to say, all my parents. Like, I was just thinking that. Have two, but so the backstory is, I shared before I was adopted, and then about a year before this event, maybe 8 months before this event that I'll tell, is I'd met my biological dad for the first time, and so there was a part of me that had finally come to this place of longing, desiring, like, man, this is who I am. I get to discover who I am, and so I had then met him. At that point, so Thanksgiving of my freshman year, Christmas time of my freshman year, and spring break of my freshman year. So that's kind of the backstory. So that summer, heading from my freshman year into my sophomore year of school, I had, again, backstory. My parents were very, very wealthy. I never was in need. I never was in want of materials, food, shelter, all that. And I had a very prestigious childhood. So I got to tell all that piece of the story because of the dichotomy about what's about to happen. So I'm not saying that to brag about wealth or anything, but you got to get the picture. So we had done that, met my biological dad, who I'm named after, 3 times. And as the story goes, we're heading into the summer. I played any and every sport, and we had just taken a break from the spring, heading into the summer, so I had a small window of not playing. At that point, it had been baseball, and I love baseball. And this is kind of, even for me, I don't know if I've ever shared this part of the story. It's where my love of baseball fell to pieces. I love baseball, all-star catcher all through elementary, middle school, going into high school. And that's where my love of baseball just fell off, because we had taken a 2-week break from sports, and my mom said, hey, you're going to go visit, his name's Todd. Hey, you're going to go visit Todd for a couple of weeks, and you're going to come home and start up sports again. So I was like, yeah, this is amazing. And so at that point, I hadn't told I just told my friends, I'm going to go see my dad again. I'll be back in a couple of weeks, and we'll keep rolling with baseball. And I don't remember all the details of it. I'd since talked to my little sister, and again, it's helpful for me to go back and tell the story and talk about the story. She was actually in the car that day. I didn't know that until a couple months ago. She had told me, I was in there with my grandmother, who's since passed away, and unbeknownst to everyone but my mom, we get into the airport, check our bags in. I have an older brother, 11 months older than I am. His name's Scott. Scott and I are at the ticket counter talking to the lady at the counter with my mom behind us. And that's back in the day where they would give the return tickets back to you. And so she's printing them off, and that as soon as that lady grabbed them from the printer, she put them on the counter. And it was like a hawk. My mom came in and swooped my tickets up, and her only words were, you're never moving home again. Again, that's the way I remember it. She may have said something different. I don't remember her saying goodbye. I don't remember anything else. I just remember the image of her taking the tickets, turning around, and walking out of the front of the airport. And that's the moment life just began to shift for me. Ooh. It really did begin to shift. And I had a carry-on bag, and I just began to just cry, not weep, uncontrollably weep, but just like that place of like, what just happened? Like back to that statement, like, I needed you there for me. You weren't there for me. Yeah. And went all the way to the airplane, sat in the airplane. That was the moment of like, gosh, whatever this feeling is of abandonment, I wouldn't have been able to call it then, but that pain, that longing, that like something is not right, and put my head on my brother's shoulder and just like saying, I'll never feel this way again. Land in Houston, Texas. And then for my high school, I lived in an 800 square foot house right on the outskirts of Houston. And life literally changed for me, everything about life. I still had shelter, food, water, all that, but not the way I once did. And I was living, again, that's where it's like weird, because I was living with my biological dad, who wasn't my dad, but I had no caregivers. I had no one to care for me. I remember going to my first day of my sophomore year of school, and everyone was talking about their summer, and one of us is not like the others. And then they're like, well, what'd you do this summer? It's like, well,
take a seat.
I got left at an airport.
Gee whiz.
And so for the rest of my high school, I was trying to navigate how not to tell the story.
Yeah.
And how to like not tell who I was. And so it was like it was just a very, very weird, that's not a feeling, but it's just a very disorienting 3 years. And that's where, again, by the grace of God, I can look now. That's where I came to know Christ, was in Texas. And I can see God's hand in all of it. But I'm like, man, that is the moment. And there's a couple other moments, but that was a monumental shift in my heart, my life. And, I dabbled with, I drank some alcohol as my freshman year, looked at some pornography, but it was, it was not in an addictive way at all. But man, and that's what really, we'll get into this way more, but man, that's for me the place of shaping. And then what you said, 15 years later, I'm sitting with you, and now it's just a part of my story. Like, I got a pair of new shoes and new pair of pants, and I got left at an airport. Like, what do you mean? What's the big deal about it?
What's so powerful, what you just said, I want to go back 7 sentences. I don't know if you know you said this or not. You said, oh, yeah, and I worked real hard on ways not to tell the story. Like, boy. And 15 years later, you're telling the story, and you're not, because you're not in it. No. You just reading a book about some dude. And so that is a powerful picture. Look at the, like in the diagram, it's just one little circle out, but the distance between this boy recognizing how he's made imperfectly, the whole bit. It has nothing to do with the wealth you were in. It's the security, consistency. I'm playing baseball and doing my thing. I'm playing basketball in the winter. Like I'm just being a kid. I'm doing my thing. And then that happens, and you start working hard on how to not tell the story, which moves further away from your recognition of the Imago Dei and puts you in that abandonment circle around the Imago Dei. And that's where you end up living. And you craft a way in your left brain, your thinking brain, you craft a way to not really tell the story, though the details are all in place. That's a very powerful story. I have, I talked about it originally almost 20 years ago. I've been with you in 30 more situations where you do it. Every time you tell the story, I think back to that athletic young teenage boy who walked into that airport, and then the boy that landed in Houston. So that inflection point, that if you want to talk about the movement from recognition of the Imago Dei in a young teenager kind of way, and then the inflection point of moving to living in an environment of abandonment. And we'll have more time to the story. The tragedy doesn't stop when you get there. And you said something worse too. We'll transition later on with this too. But what you described is so painful. You said, I had food and water and shelter. Like, well, yeah, so does my dog.
True.
Right. So that's not saying it's a bad thing, but like your world, when we live in abandonment, in that abandonment loop, looping around the Imago Dei, we end up saying, hey, food, water, and shelter, just like they have in Siberian gulags. Hey, that wasn't that bad. Like, yeah, it really was that bad. Again, naming the story without blaming your mom and whoever, like just naming it's like, yeah, it's that bad. The best the story is you got what they get in Siberian prisons.
That's right.
And so that's how you end up not really telling the story. So
true.
Man, Todd, I want to as we kind of close here, I want to piggyback off what I've seen you do for years in terms of what we want to do as we end each episode is give people something to take away, something they could do. But man, I really encourage listeners, viewers of the podcast, pay really close attention to your own life as you think about who God made, how he made you, what are events in your life, even if they seem to be benign. Now, this is not at all benign.
That's right.
But even if they seem benign, like where is a point in time to where I assumed you drove to the airport assuming you would have what we would call a partnership with your mom. And the abandonment was not just I needed you and you weren't there. It's also I counted on you being there and you weren't there. And there was never a repair of that rupture, really. So if you're listening here, I really encourage you, because I've seen you do it so many times, so many ways. Just be chronicling, even in your own mind or your own journal, like not just I needed you, but when was I counting on you? Right. And you disappeared. It'd be a very powerful assignment. So thanks for telling that.
Yeah, I think too, I think we can get hung up on our parents, but you said it earlier, coaches, teachers, friends, girlfriends, boyfriends, like where in our lives, like, can you think of times like I needed someone there and they just simply were not there?
That's right.
Me. So I hope the listeners will remember that piece of the story. So often this work exposes our parents and we don't see the other caregivers.
That's right.
And components in that.
Right
so
on.
I would say that. And
right on.
I think, what we're going to talk about next episode is really then what do we do when we move, as we continue to move further away from who God created us to be, so next episode is really going to be looking at like, what are what we would have labeled, what's the false narratives?
Yeah.
And the false narrative is how do we survive?
How do we not tell the story?
That's right. How do we not tell the story?
Yeah.
And yet convince ourselves that we're telling the story. And that's really, Bradshaw coined the phrase, toxic shame. Yeah. But for us, there's a story that comes out of the story.
That's right.
And that's our way to adapt, to not tell the story, to survive in the story. And just like you just said, so often when I early on in telling the story, I had to give a false narrative around the story because it was too painful to actually tell the story.
Yeah.
And then so many parts of that story I can look back, not now, by healing and a lot of work, like man, I must have done something wrong for me. Like, what's my role? What's my blame that I would get left at an airport? If I hadn't have done X, Y, and Z, I probably would not. So
that's right.
Next episode, we're going to look at the false narratives that come out of our abandoning stories and the toxic shame that comes with that. So
we start with an Imago Dei at the core, and we experience what we've been talking about. And the attempt to explain what happened ends up in this really painful place. So enjoyed it again.
Yeah, as always, I love doing this. So yeah. Stay tuned for next episode on toxic shame and the false narratives.
Look forward to seeing you. Thanks for watching, listening.
Thanks again for joining us on Return to Heart. To access resources mentioned on this program or to find out more about Tin Man Ministries, please go to tinman.org.